Hi guys, welcome to the Pigsty workshop. I'm going to be reviewing the Tsumura bars today. I'm going to be looking at how hard wearing they are. I'm going to be looking at how to look after them. I'm going to be looking at how to sharpen the chain. I'm going to be looking at how to look after the chain to make sure the bar lasts as long as possible. And I'm being stared at by a Norman knight in a sumo wrestling position. He is actually going to be fitted onto that horse in the background, but he does look a little strange now. Tsumura bar. So, in descending order, Tsumura have actually made us this lovely 22-inch, it's about the size of a toonie tip. It's probably very slightly smaller than a toonie tip, but not a lot smaller. This is actually running 325 pitch chain. I think it would work beautifully with 325 low pro. And again, like I'll be showing you later on in the video, I've actually taken the heels, ground the heels off of the backs of the cutters on this, and it bores in beautifully now. So that's a really nice mid-range bar. Suits the Husqvarna 550 XP absolutely perfectly, and it has the right mount for that as well. So it would fit a mid-range Dolmar Makita saw as well, 512, and it would probably fit a mid-range Echo quite well as well. Moving on, we have the 16-inch bar. So 16-inch, now they go down to these 8mm radius tips. The 14-inch, which I'm running on this Echo 360. Again, just the perfect fit for this saw. All of these bars, and please don't tell me in the comments, but I know this is a little bit too slack. I would have this running at probably that kind of tension. Not much less than that. You really have to keep an eye on the tension of your chain because it makes a big difference to how well the saw oils. So we then move down another step to the 12-inch. So we've got 16 and 14 and a 12, and we also have a 10, and these are all in 050 gauge. So we have 16, 14, 12 and 10-inch bars, all with an 8mm radius, all with 050 gauge guide bar groove. That's the one. I know what I'm saying. So moving downwards then, we actually have one which I don't have with me currently, which is the 12-inch or more or less 11-inch version of this. Now this is the 9-inch running 043 gauge, and there's an 11 to 12-inch running 043 gauge as well. So it's a vast array of bars, all with this 8mm tip, 2 that are 043 and 4 that are 050 gauge. Absolutely fantastic set of bars. So to give you an idea of where these fit in, the Tsumura bar has a radius of 8mm. That's the smallest bars apart from the Sugihara on the market. I was lucky enough when I went to Japan to have a lovely tour around the factory and see how they were made and see the quality of the metals they were using. So in ascending order, we have the quarter tip, the dime tip, and the Tsumura tip here. Nearly made a slip up there. This is the Tsumura tip is 8mm radius, which gives a really tight turning curve. Now, this may seem great in the beginning, but what you need to be very, very, very careful of is how you sharpen the chainsaw, because how you sharpen, how you treat the chain makes a massive difference to the life of the bar. So, Tsumura bars, they've come up with this very sleek flat-sided design, which seems like it would derail quite easily, but actually the tightness of the tip and the angle here, this is the important bit, because this leads the chain back round and to go around the sprocket nice and easily. Now you can have derailing problems when the sprocket is too big. So if you use a rim sprocket, you can actually have a sprocket that's slightly too big for the bar, which can actually lead to derailleur over this edge or over this edge here. And if the chain is too slack, then obviously it can lead to derailing. But sometimes derailing doesn't always mean it pops off. I don't know if anybody of you experienced the derailleur when it comes out of the groove and just sits on the edge of the bar. Now that's really, really bad for the bar, especially when you don't notice for a while and start trying to cut with the saw, because you end up with grooves that come off the bar. As we know, quarter pitch chain comes in two different sizes. It's 043 and 050 gauge. We've got two different bars here from Tsumura. The top one, the shorter one, is actually a 9-inch bar, which is a bit of an odd size, but there you go, works quite well for me. So a 9-inch bar which runs 043 gauge quarter pitch chain, and here we have a 10-inch bar running 050 quarter pitch chain. Now both the types of quarter pitch chain you will need to modify in order to make them run safely, securely and smoothly around the tips of these bars. Now, I've been using these bars now since December last year. It's now the end of May, beginning of June. So the incredible thing is I haven't burnt any out yet. I haven't popped the tips on any of them, which I was quite surprised about. I've tried to hammer them as much as I can. There's a few of them which I haven't been able to use yet because I haven't had the right saws to run them, and I'm going to move on to that in a bit. What they've done is they've produced the 043 gauge bars with the mount that fits the Husqvarna electric saw. It also fits very nicely on the Stihl 150. The oil holes line up perfectly. It's the right mount for that. Now, I would love to see these bars being produced with a universal mount. I think that would just make them the dog's proverbials. But I'm going to pop this chain on, and I'm going to show you what I've done to this chain to help it run smoothly around the tip. So, if we just pop the cover back on there, try and find the nuts in the pigsty, the workshop. Okay, so that's too slack, but this is just purely for illustration purposes. Can you see there? I've actually taken the heel off the cutter at the back. That's the critical thing. If you want to make any bar last long, if you want to make any chain go smoothly around the tip of a bar, you have to take the heels off the cutters. Now, Stihl have very kindly produced a ready modified chain, which you can see on this one here. Now, they've already taken the heels off the cutters. Now, the one thing to take into consideration is that works great with a dime tip. Once you get down to this size, one of the tricky things is actually you have to take even more off the heel of the cutter. And speaking to a German friend of mine who's been developing the next carving chain with Stihl, you actually have to whiz a little bit off of the very front of the depth gauge as well. So I'm going to modify this chain, and we're just going to test test the bar, I'm going to do a little bit of boring in with it as it is now. Okay, so what I was finding there was there was actually a bit of resistance when it came to boring in using the top quadrant, the kickback zone. Now obviously, as we all know, if we're using carving bars a lot, then there isn't a lot of kickback in the kickback zone because it's so small. So there wasn't any kickback with these in the slightest. That's quite nice. But even just that little bit of use, the tip is extremely hot. It's hotty. I can touch it, but it's heating up, and I can tell it's heating up. And this is one of the critical things which damages carving bars. Now you can see on this has had a bit of use, this bar already. I was using this in Japan, and one of the things you'll notice with every carving bar is you get this discoloration at the tip, and that's the carving bar heating up and burning off the paint. It starts to burn off the outer layer, the protective layer that they put on in the factory. With the Canon bars, for instance, it burns that black paint that they put on off, and you can see the bluing around the edges of the bar. You can see the bluing on the tip, or the discoloration on the tip. It's perfectly normal, and these bars can cope with an awful lot of heat, but you do have to be very, very careful. So the one main thing to take into consideration with any carving bar is make sure it's oiling. No, the two main things to take into consideration is make sure it's oiling and make sure that you've sharpened it right. Nay, the three main things to take into consideration: make sure it's oiling, make sure you've sharpened it right, and make sure that you don't overwork it. These bars aren't meant for cutting big pieces off. These bars are meant for tickling the surface. These bars are meant for detail work. So use a proper saw and a normal bar, standard bar and chain, if you want to do any big cutting. So as you can see, I've taken these heels off. Now it would be far more accurate to do this with a bench grinder. You'd be able to set it up so that you could get these completely identical. I've just done this purely for speed, and also because I don't have a bench grinder currently, but it is on the list of things to buy. I think it'd be incredibly useful to have. So I'm going to do those same 4 little cuts again with that little twist one at the end, and I'm just going to have a look at the difference. Now this bar still hasn't completely cooled down, still just a tad warm, so we'll see how it works. Wow, what a difference. The bar isn't nearly as hot as it was before. And considering it was already warm when I started, when I was boring in then, I didn't actually have to push the saw. Before, I was actually having to physically push the saw to let it bore in. This time the saw actually wanted to do the work. The saw was actually pulling itself in. Now the big difference here is that the reason that this is so important, Mick Burns picked up on this when the quarter pitch chains and the dime tip carving bars first started being used, and Mick's been on this for ages and ages and ages, you can see that the radius here, as if you drew a straight line up through the contact point, you will reach somewhere approximately halfway across the cutter. Now, the cutter end needs to do the work. That actually needs to be hitting the wood. So as it comes round, one of the things is the depth gauge obviously is there to stop it cutting too much off, stops it grabbing, stops it kicking back, and the actual cutter here, as it comes round, physically grabs the wood. Now what the problem is, when you have a standard quarter pitch chain, the heel comes right back to here, and the heel actually stands higher up than the cutter, which means that as it cuts, the heel is bouncing on the cut that you've just made, and this is the problem, and this is why carving bars split open at the end. It's why they overheat, and it's why they get damaged. So people, please pay attention to how you're treating your carving bars and how you're sharpening the chain. So back to Tsumura bars. So one of the things that I've found is, because of the mount that Tsumura have put on their bars, machines like this one, this Stihl 211, the bar can't be mounted straight onto it because of the way it oils. So I'm just going to take this apart and show you. I was using that Tsumura bar just before on an Echo 360. Works absolutely fantastically on the Echo 360. The mount that they've put on is the Echo mount, and the big difference between this and a lot of other mounts is it actually oils through the location holes. So the location holes not only determine the bar tension and have that pin sat in them, but they actually have a gap that leads through to the groove, and that's how the chain gets oiled. The Cannon bar usually comes with a C, well, this is a C1 mount. They can make them with anything, but this is a C1 mount. This is a universal mount. It has oil holes. It also has gaps where the locator pins sit, and that actually goes right the way through to the chain. So, one of the things that happens is when you have a bar that oils through these holes, when you have a mount plate that has these holes in, like most of the small Stihl saws do, these holes will actually fill up with oil before anything else does. So what I've done is I've actually filled these holes with expanding glue and then sanded it off over the top. Just at the top, there's no need to do any more. So this is if you want to retrofit an Echo mount bar to a small Stihl. Now one of the other things that I've had to do here, so this is actually a really tight fit as well, this particular one. Something else I've had to do is I've had to cut a little bit of orange plastic out here. I used a guide bar cover, so I cut a little bit of orange plastic out, because where the hole sits, it actually sits more or less over that orange plate, and that was hiding a hole. So what was happening was the oil was actually pumping against the solid side of the bar here, and the problem with that is when the oil is pumping against something solid, that's when your worm gear inside your oiler can get damaged and strip, and that's when you need to get a replacement oiler. So lining the oil holes up is absolutely critical to any saw working properly. So the other thing I've had to do is I've had to take a Stanley knife and just shave off underneath where the natural oil hole is, just to allow the oil to come out of the saw and filter down into these into these holes here. So, and I've been using this bar and chain. So this is the 16-inch Tsumura. I've been using this for quite a while. Absolutely fantastic for getting into those very deep grooves where you have to clean out and you can't get any other saw in. Nice and narrow. One of the really nice things about these Tsumura bars is they're brilliant for any jigsaw work. We actually used this one as a jigsaw to cut 3-inch oak into curves, and it worked absolutely fantastically. We clamped a little wooden setup that we built onto the bar that acted as a jigsaw plate, and because of that narrowness of the bar there, it will cut round curves much nicer. So you can imagine it's just like a jigsaw blade, and you can get much tighter curves with it. So it's not something that every carver comes across or needs, but I've found it useful over the past few months. So I think that more or less concludes my review of Tsumura bars. I would like to say they are, I've found them absolutely brilliant. I've found them great for detail. I'll have a little time lapse now of a demo of me carving a human face with one, just so you can see the level of intricacy you can get with an 8mm diameter tip. Now, there are other bar companies around who make the small tip. Husqvarna, I mentioned earlier on, they're the only other ones really who've tried to develop this smaller tip. Their first bars were a laminate bar, which didn't last very long. A lot of the tips were popping. I had numerous friends saying, "Oh, don't buy these, they're rubbish." But I tell you what, I have got a Sugihara bar which I did make last, simply by taking the heels off the cutters and a little bit off the depth gauge at the front, and you would be surprised how much longer the bar lasts when you treat it well. So these Tsumura bars are no exception to that rule, but they are made of a solid piece. They're not a laminate. They are a really good high quality metal. All of these ends are hand finished. I watched them welding the stellite onto the tip in the factory. Incredible precision, as you'd expect from the Japanese. And yeah, I've just been very, very impressed with everything so far about these bars. There we go. You get the idea. It's a little rough, but so the whole, the nice thing I like about these small bars is you can get really tight little curves to emphasize things like the human face. Same with furring if bears is your thing, or feathering if eagles is your thing. And it's just really nice having a bar that does what I want it to do and goes to the kind of level of detail that I want it to. So that's me, over and out. Simon O'Rourke. You can catch me on treecarving.co.uk, on Facebook. My page is just Simon O'Rourke Tree Carving, and yeah, I think I'm pretty satisfied with the Tsumura bar, and I will be ordering some more, and you can buy them from me. Thank you.